The only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Even the United States Supreme Court has said that in a case called New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Yeah, so in the Heller decision, District of Columbia versus Heller, Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia said that a person has a right to keep a firearm in his home for protection. But he never touched on the keep. He touched on the keep, but not on the bear arms provision. And now that Bruin decision says, yeah, you got a right to carry a firearm out into the community also. And, of course, the lefties are scrambling all over to restrict that as much as possible. In New York, you can't go into any one of 200 different kinds of buildings with a firearm. They haven't gone so far as to say you can't walk on a public sidewalk with it, but I suspect that's the direction they'd like to go.
Can't wear a polka dot. Well, you know, true to form, the PDN has another editorial cartoon. Not from anybody at PDN, because I don't think there's any talent there. I know that's pretty harsh. But it doesn't seem like they have any kind of discretion at all either. They have, you remember, I forgot his name, I think Eric Carr, the person who wrote The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
No.
It was a children's book that showed a whole bunch of pages with different kind of fruits and the caterpillar walking through each fruit and eating holes in through it. So this editorial cartoon has a caterpillar, and it's called The Very Hungry Scottish Spiller. And the first fruit he eats through is roe. And the next one is the carry law. And so they're trying to depict this SCOTUS as somebody who just moused and irresponsible, just eating through things. But it's actually the opposite. It's the very hungry, living constitutionalists. That's right. And they're the ones that ate holes through the Constitution.
Yeah, if anybody's going to eat the Constitution, it's got to be them.
Right. So this is the very, to me, it's either intellectual dishonesty or just plain ignorance.
Yeah.
For publishing something like this.
Really. Yeah, I noticed that. It's a good call, Jose. It's really disappointing to see stuff like that in the news. Okay, so let's go to Demi Akotny and see what the Daily News is trying to pass off as an editorial today. I got to borrow your hard copy, Jose. Thank you. Yeah, here we go. Connect. Government of Guam Relief Center now open. That's the entire editorial. The rest is pure news story. Tells you something that the government has done, a new service, etc. It has no editorial content whatsoever. But it's just one more way to make the current administration look good heading into the election. You know, you wouldn't want to cover it as a news story on page 10 when you can put it on as an editorial on the opinion page. Sorry I made you come all the way in here just for that, Jose.
I added that to my daily steps.
All right. Okay, let's take a look and see what we got on the card for today. We've got Michael's... Go ahead, Jose. Ring that bell. We've got Michael San Nicolas versus Lou. We've got Michael San Nicolas versus Lou. We've got the Post versus Michael San Nicolas. We've got All In versus Michael San Nicolas. We've got Frank Uggan versus Lou. Felix versus Lou. Lou is a defendant in every one of these cases. I wonder why. And then we've got the second chapter of the Archdiocese versus Lou and Calamity Jane. This one is called Tall Tales versus Jane. And then some stuff that's on the calendar, the card from a couple of days ago: Wisco versus Harvesters, A Mad Black Woman versus Roe, and so on. So, of course, we have to start out with systemic racism. I think everybody is pretty familiar with the analogy that I draw. The rice is actually orange, but we call it red rice. And anybody who doesn't call it red rice is in for a heap of trouble because he just doesn't understand the narrative. You might get canceled. Moving right along to the Public Law 36-34 part of the card, which ought to be entitled Some People Can Never Learn. And it goes like this. We've got the Inarajan Municipal Planning Council is having a meeting on July 14th. And item number 6 on their agenda is old business, but they don't tell you what the old business is. So what that means is anything they started but haven't finished, they may bring, discuss, and act on. And of course, just the reason that they put the agenda wrong voids whatever they do. We got the Port Authority doing the same thing, old business with no description. Some people just never catch on, you know. Okay, so much for that. And in my packet here, I've got the Book of Life, the Book of Jane and the Book of Life. I've got to get the Book of Jane on my website, on my blog, which is called frombob.blogspot.com. I'll get it up there in a day or two, and I'll tell you when it's there so you can go and read it yourself. It has more impact in print than if you hear me read it to you. And next I've got MSN versus Lou. San Nicolas delivers final congressional address, aims for Adelup. Delegate Michael San Nicolas delivered his final congressional address Monday night and took the opportunity to highlight both the accomplishments of his office and the perceived failings of the current administration as he vies for the governor's seat. The Legislative Hall was split down the middle with several rounds of applause coming from one half throughout the speech, while the other, inclusive of administrative officials, sat silent. I was on that side, and I clapped from time to time. And if you were watching on TV, you might have seen me sitting in an outside chair in my red shirt, because yesterday was indeed Monday, right? Quote, "There's so much gratitude in our hearts for the once-in-a-lifetime privilege which you have bestowed on us," Michael San Nicolas says. Causing me, and you know, this is just a horrible thing to do, Michael, for a public official, anybody speaking in public, to refer to yourself in the first person plural. In writing, you can do that if you're the editor of a newspaper. You can say, "We find that the governor's initiative is crazy." You can say that. Zangin mapotgihaw, tadzagwahanai on usa we. If you're pregnant, you can use the word we. Or if you are part of conjoined twins, one of conjoined twins, formerly known as Siamese twins, you could refer to yourself as we. Other than that, it comes across as a pompous affectation, like maybe, I suppose royalty could use it too. I suppose Queen Elizabeth can refer to herself as we, but it comes across as a pompous affectation. It's kind of like atanun sa takiludzo. You know, look at me, I'm way up there. So he says, "There's so much gratitude in our heart for once-in-a-lifetime privilege which you have bestowed on us. Together, we have redefined what the public has come to expect from their congressional office." He doesn't have a horn up there. He should have had your horn up. Let's try that. I'll pretend I'm Michael San Nicolas in the legislature saying this. Okay, ready, Jose? Together, we have redefined what the public has come to expect from their congressional office, like ethics charges.
Real quick, Bob, I just want to say it the way St. Nicholas actually said it. Together office.
Yeah, I'll get to my critique after I go through the articles here. But starting out, you put your finger on it. I can't listen that fast. The idea that the non-voting delegate seat was unimportant was, quote, small thinking that keeps us small. I guess he's referring to Robert Underwood. He said as he highlighted much of the work he's done advocating for Guam. St. Nicholas early in the speech refuted misinformation he said was spread in a video recording of Governor Lulian Guerrero, a video in which he stated federal aid would have come to Guam regardless of efforts by the congressional office. If it's going to rain, it's going to rain. All those folks out there with the headdresses and the tom-toms dancing around made no difference at all. The alleged statements have not been verified by the PDN. Too hard. Too hard.
And it was like a live fact-checking for a PDN.
Yeah, really. Quote, the statements are dangerous, not because of the political season, but because it reduces the expectations of our people should have of their congressional office, St. Nicholas said. St. Nicholas pointed to the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, distributed early on during the Wuhan virus pandemic, as one example. The program was originally intended to be distributed through state unemployment programs. However, Guam did not have an unemployment program, and a backdoor deal had to be cut to include local residents in the legislation for the program. That doesn't sound very good. A backdoor deal. A backdoor deal is made by the same people who will pay you for your part of the deal, but they'll pay you under the table. I think Michael might have used the word workaround, which is exactly what they did. We don't have unemployment insurance, so that mechanism couldn't be used. So we had to construct a kind of doppelganger unemployment program here, a kind of mirror image of an unemployment program to get that job done. Much of the same effort was put in to ensure millions of federal dollars flowed into the islands over previous years, St. Nicholas said. St. Nicholas said Guam's economic situation is more dire than the image the current administration puts forward. We are not in economic recovery mode. We're simply climbing out of the rubble of bad policy that we have been buried under because our economic activity and outlook has not actually improved. I don't think he's far off here. When the Red Queen just shut everything down as tight as she possibly could and killed our economy for 2 years. With Japanese and Korean currency at a 20-year low compared to the dollar, many tourists would likely delay coming to Guam and favor other travel destinations. Rather than invest in economic recovery, federal resources coming to Guam were misallocated, St. Nicholas said, and not going toward relief for the public. Well, if all I had were that sentence, can you invest in economic recovery and relief for the public at the same time? Doesn't seem logical, does it, Jose? You could do one or not the other. Mm-hmm. St. Nicholas asserted that the money which is due to be returned to the federal government if unspent by late 2024 could not be used to build a replacement of Guam Memorial Hospital. He said the multi-million-dollar... Did St. Nicholas talk about building the hospital, Jose?
He talked about building the hospital, and then he opened up a technical manual and told us how it was going to happen.
Yeah. Flashing the blueprints on the screen at the legislature building, right?
The way to open up a door, the whole process, it was pretty long.
All the technical specs involved.
What I did find interesting is when he first started talking about the difficulty of replacing or building a replacement for GMH, you saw the speaker nod a little bit, but then I think she stopped herself.
She caught herself.
She caught herself, but that was very interesting. I'm going to go back and watch the tapes.
Good call. St. Nicholas said the multi-agency healthcare complex that the administration has pushed for was too complex and would take a minimum of 2 years planning before the money for it could even be spent. Instead, the federal dollars should be pumped into aid programs that are planned to be paid out with local tax revenue, he said, such as the upcoming power rebate, which will use $25 million in local funds. Wow. We do not need to spend a single local dollar on discussions for utility relief. Shocking. Increasing pay for law enforcement, teachers, and nurses through executive order instead of through legislation was also grossly irresponsible and did not ensure that raises could be handled sustainably by the government. Now, it's interesting that St. Nicholas gets right inside the legislative and executive offices, although he's really still on the outside trying to get in right now. St. Nicholas, in his speech, said more residents would flee the island if we do not get our act together on how we use what we have and make our island livable for our people. I got to stop there for a second. Now, we'll get to it later on, but there was an article in the newspaper that a family of 12 is packing up and moving to Washington. And St. Nicholas read the whole article into his speech. And it's kind of newsworthy, but ever since I've lived here, I've seen people do that. People pack up and move to the States. There was an outfit here when I first got here called Woostic Plantation. And it was exactly that. They grew a lot of stuff. They had a stand out on what was then called Marine Drive. We still got Ernie Woostic around. I asked him whatever happened to Woostic. Oh, they all packed up and went to, I don't know, East Jesus or North Oregon or someplace like that. I guess they figured they could do better there. My brother-in-law, Uncle Benny, he and a guy named Bill Sablon in 1947 or 8 climbed aboard a Navy ship. Even Scamby did this. And back in those days, for like $140, you could board a Navy ship and they would take you to California.
My grandfather did that right before the war.
Okay. So Uncle Benny did that, and he wound up, he got a job when he got there, and he never went to college. I don't know if he even graduated from high school ever, but he wound up owning a nice house and raising a whole passel of kids, and he had a really great life. And a lot of people knew that you could do that, and a lot of people did it. And every time, you know, that during the time that I was in the States for law school, one of our routines was, hey, let's see if we could find some Chamorros. And you could always find Chamorros because they packed up and moved to the States. I've been to Liberation Day in Copper's Cove, California, and there were a couple hundred people there. So this is not unusual. Now, I'm going to say something that probably will be misunderstood, but I think it's something we need to talk about anyhow. How many people can an island of 212 square miles support? How many people can live on this island? Now, if you're talking Manhattan, Manhattan's an island that's probably about a quarter the size of Guam, and it's got like 3 million people living on it. We couldn't have 3 million people living here. We couldn't have 1 million people living here. I don't think we could even handle 200,000 the way things are going right now. So is it something that we have to get out our crying towels every time someone does something like the Gogwis do and pack up and move to the States? Or do we see it as just part of the phenomenon of living on a small island in the Western Pacific? That there will be times when people see that the grass is, I don't know if I should say greener or browner, on the other side of the pond, and pack up and move to the United States, and almost always prosper when they do it. No, I've seen a lot of them bounce back. They're there for a couple years. They come back. Yeah, we liked it in the States. Tadza como que Guam. There's just no place like Guam, so we came back.
And it was advantageous for him only because the article came out. Was it that day or the day before?
The timing.
The timing was correct.
Yeah.
But I wonder, and this has nothing to do with how he put it out there, if there is a discussion to be had about income levels. Now, granted, the Gogwis have a special situation. They have 12 children.
Right.
And they laid it on the article. Mm-hmm. But I know that people have discussed about the upper high class and the poverty level, mm-hmm. and who are the in-betweeners?
Right.
And can their lives be sustained on an island that has probably not the same kind of job opportunities as the States because it is a small island?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You sound like you took a plank out of Ken Leon Guerrero's platform there, Jose.
Well, sometimes it makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just filibustering.
Sometimes it's just Ken Leon Guerrero, right? But he's got a good point there.
There's a point there. But for Mike St. Nicholas, it was advantageous more than, I think, relevant.
Yeah. Well, they say the saying is, in politics, timing is everything. Okay, going on with his article here. St. Nicholas in his speech said more residents would flee the island if we do not get our act together on how we use what we have and make one livable for our people. Flee the island. That's what you expect from someone who has committed a crime. But people like the Gogwis are not fleeing the island. St. Nicholas threw in support for recent legislation to cap profits on local gas companies. I'm going to get to that on the card, which he said could drop prices by $1 or more at the pump if done correctly, or it could create shortages of gasoline. The cost of housing also had to be addressed by investing in manpower development for labor, cutting taxes on supplies and materials for affordable housing, and closing out the allocation of land through the Chamorro Land Trust. Closing out the allocation of land. Does that mean stopping it? Not a very well-worded sentence. This is my last congressional address. When I was sitting there in the session hall last night, when I heard him say that, I thought what he was kind of implying is that I'm going to stretch it out till the end of my term. Yeah. This is my last congressional address as we put in our candidacy to serve as governor. So I guess we'll have two governors. Well, he's got a running mate. With our partner and candidate for lieutenant governor, Sabrina Salas Martinani. Sabrina was there, kind of dressed up the ticket a little bit. So in this capacity, all we can say is thank you. Deeply from the bottoms of our hearts, St. Nicholas said. Leon Guerrero responds. Moments after the congressional address concluded, the governor said St. Nicholas' remarks were very disappointing. I thought it was not very helpful at all for our island. To tear down any progress we've made toward economic recovery and totally demean the people of Guam in terms of struggling hard, working together to lift each other up, she said. The governor said the delegates' message was negative, not optimistic. It ignored the work already done to plan for the new hospital and the efforts by the legislature to support local recovery. Right now, I think because our people are feeling a lot better about returning back to, grit your teeth, Jose, normalcy.
Wrong.
Normality. We can't tear them down. We have to work with them and lift them up. I get the feeling from reading that the governor's for the people, Jose.
Well, it's interesting that she's all of a sudden for the legislature.
Yeah, right. And well, she should be. I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back from the break, I've got Senator Chris Duenas on fleeing the island. Now, Chris, I hope you're not going to flee. Hang on until the end of this short break here anyhow.
Candid, The Point, and the Guam Daily Post are proud to present another Platform 2022 debate. Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio and Lieutenant Governor candidate Sabrina Salas Matanani. Phil Leon Guerrero and Montesilva Tyron will present topics and issues of concern to every Guamanian. July 20th at 6 p.m. everywhere. Broadcast, simulcast, and webcast on Facebook, Candid News, and on the air at 93.3 FM and on KGTF. Platform 2022 from Candid, the Guam Daily Post, and 93.3 The Point.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are, back in business again. I hope Chris Duenas is still on island. Chris, you didn't flee the island, did you?
Your Honor, Honorable Marine, Senator, my favorite talk show host, no, sir. I'm here to stay. I will, in some form or fashion, be either in the ocean, drifting around, haven't figured it out yet, or I will be here on this island after my final days, all the rest of my life, and I will be buried here. I love Guam, and I'll never leave this island.
I feel the same way, Jose. I mean, Chris.
Yeah, I just, but I wanted to share your sentiments and kind of maybe make a caveat to it of some sort. I completely agree with you. Guam, the Guam that I grew up in, my dad struggled. There was 7 of us. My dad and my mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She raised us. We had a very strong, tight family network. A lot of shared resources. It was the old Guam, the Guam that you came and loved and married your beautiful wife and had your family here. And I believe why you love this place and will, along with me, spend all eternity here as well. At least our remains. But those days, I grew up during that time, and that was part of survival. But all my time on Guam and understanding Guam, because I've spent time in the States too with different family members, not living but visiting, and of course the economies of scale and different things. I mean, we all love going to the States to buy our 5 years worth of clothing and come back with 2 suitcases and all the stuff that is so affordable. And I enjoy, cooking and cooking out and just having a lot of fun with our family because it's so much less expensive. And then, but the point I'm trying to make is since I grew up on Guam, it's always just been expensive. I think you've talked about this before on your show before we went into the American Dialing Plan. I remember my mom, when we sent some of our family to college, like weeping inside of a booth down at RCA, I think the first minute was $9 or the first 3 minutes. And you'd walk out of there and it'd be $50 to talk for 10 or 15 minutes to your family. And now we just call on a cell phone and do that. I mean, cost of living in certain areas all the way growing up on Guam and even till today, it's just expensive to live here. And, you're right in terms of those terms. I think the caveat that I would make is when people make the decision, like the Govies or others, it's when they make the final decision, it's based on their hope for the future, right? Because they have lived through all of that as well. I think maybe one of the points to be made is when, many of our residents, at the same time make a decision that, you know what, I just don't see a future that I could at least even sustain where I'm at, and then a future for my children to have a quality of life that either I had even through struggle, and I just don't see it getting any better. And I think that's the difference. It's the outlook that probably is the difference. And if there's the government, you've always had the greatest speeches on the stump. I loved them before. I want to tell everybody tonight that you're all going to have a Lexus in every driveway. Your roads are going to be gold, paved with gold, and milk and honey will flow from the water fountain, and everything's going to be great. I learned that from you. I always love listening to your some speeches. But it's of course it's not about that, but it is about a certain amount of certainty. And I think that's, if there was anything to take away from that part of the speeches, Governor Camacho and his team is talking about, there's a lot of parallels in terms of where Governor Camacho is going and Senator Toniata and their platform and their rollout of their 7 points and what was spoken about last night. If you look at contrast, the two campaigns really are starkly contrasted against the administration. So I think the point that the congressman might have been trying to make, and even Governor Camacho has made, by having the backdrop of his 7-point plan being closed businesses and other shuttered businesses and some sort of hopelessness, it's kind of stark, that the governor says, your speeches are not about hope, but it's because I believe, and I think you can see this probably, and maybe Jose can see this, there is two Guams right now. And I think that divide is getting wider and wider. And so while I agree with you, there is a threshold to, our population and viability. I think the stronger point there was maybe the people who are departing saying, I don't see it changing.
Hear what you're saying, Chris. So what do you, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
After you.
Yeah. So I think that if anything, we don't even have to be nasty about this, right? I mean, this campaign really is exactly about that. This is what I think people are going to be looking at. I understand the frustration, even myself on the campaign trail. The 35th, the 36th, nothing's changed, but there was effort, right? There was effort by certain individuals and a certain amount of individuals to try to turn the tide. The thing is you need more, if you're bobsledding in Alaska, right? I mean, you just need more of pulling the wagon, right? Pulling the sled. And so I think that's what people are going to have to look at this time. How many people in the legislature are going to get to pull the sled to really correct this action? And then also, who are we going to put our trust in to say, there are two Guams, and I'm not going to paint a full rosy picture that everything has turned around and I've done nothing wrong in the past, the lockdowns, the extended period of that, the emergency, everything else, all of that was just right on time and everything else, and I did everything right and things are perfect. That's just not true. And I understand in a campaign, you can't turn around and go, well, I did kind of a shitty job. You have to paint it a certain way. But by the same token, you can't also, ignore the fact that the reason why this contrast exists now from the other two candidates is the fact that represents a super large number of people who see a completely different Guam.
Well, and once again, the day after Liberation Day, we're going to see the two Guams in sharp relief. One Guam will have to work just like they always do at jobs that don't pay as well as those in the other Guam who won't have to work at all because they're going to get a surprise holiday from the governor. Mm-hmm. These would be the same folks that during the pandemic, beginning of the pandemic, that got to stay home and get paid for staying home. Well, everybody else couldn't go to work and didn't get paid. So that two Guams is still there, and this governor has done absolutely nothing to remove the distance between them.
Yeah, and the other thing, Your Honor, is the business owners are faced with another dilemma as well. I mean, what do they do with that holiday pay, right?
Yeah.
So now they're stuck with an additional bill, hoping that the margins will give them enough money, and whatever staffing levels they're going to have that day, and how they're going to pay that out, because it is now a holiday. Depending on what their plans, what benefits they have for their workers, it's just it gums up the works, and it's not sensitive to the fact that the issues at hand, right? In closing on this, we're going to be having a public hearing on Friday, and with alacrity try to move on this $25 million that's being asked from the legislature. And I want to emphasize this point, Stan Senator, from unaudited, because we're late on the audit now. We're going to be debating unaudited general fund revenues for the general fund to deal with the governor's promise during her speech. And this is the stark contrast that I liked about the congressman's speech. Why do we continue down this road? I don't think he was trying to say the hospital is a pipe dream. I think what he was trying to say, the hospital is a capital improvement project that will on its own require the funding from the hospital, which is an authority which generates its own revenue, to be able to do the debt service, and probably require a supplemental appropriation annually from the legislature to handle that debt service going out over 30, 35 years in order to finance such a huge project. But we're in the here and now, and the obligation of that money, and we've been talking about this, Your Honor, the obligation of that money just doesn't make any sense in the grand picture. I don't think there was any talk about the fact that the hospital is never going to happen and we're just going to have to live with what we got. It was the thought of that process going forward when we can't even build a school in 10 years, when the land management building that I signed off on 12 years ago never became a reality, although it was still prime at its time with debt service, with rental from all land agencies and everything else. We've proven time and time again that even the simpler projects, not anywhere near complex as a hospital, is so voluminous, it was a reality check, right? So the thing is what do we do with the here and now? Why do we keep spending general fund money on things that the rescue plan was designed for? And yet we continue to obligate these unaudited funds that are a surplus that's not even realized. And then you're going into a next fiscal year budget with tons of raises that have been obligated for and everything else. It's like we're spending like, we deserve to go to Disneyland when really we should just take a vacation to Cocos Island.
Yeah. Well, this thing about tying up $300 million to build a hospital, which we've got to start on, we need to have the groundbreaking before November 8th, right, Jose? I mean, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in this together. I think Jose contributes just well enough. I think Jose.
Yeah, I'm looking at him and talking at you, but yeah,
I like it. I like talking to him too.
All right, we got to have the groundbreaking before the election day, so we got to do this right away. So we're kind of going at the hospital the way the greenies want to go at solar power. We've got to stop buying oil today and go convert immediately to 100% solar power.
Excellent analogy.
The fact that that's impossible has nothing to do with what we ought to be doing.
Absolutely. The optics and the politics and the ability to just convince everyone that we're green and we're right on is so more important than anything else, and we'll figure it out on November 10th.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing, so that is the contrast. I mean, that the governance that the people of Guam will be looking at going forward is, what's the sober reality and what is the pipe dream, right? Because that's what it looks like right now. If it was less contrast and it was really minute in terms of the thought process, I think that you wouldn't see this back and forth that's going to emerge. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting 3 to 4 months. Definitely looks like it's going to be an interesting 45 days going into the primary. That's exactly what it comes down to, and I think that's where some of the mistakes may be being made, in not more of a reality check on and once again on the hospital again. Let's just be clear. The funding source, that the bill that was passed by the legislature, and this is what the congressman said again, and we've been saying on the Republican caucus, that funding source of the $60 million that's reimbursed is now a trust fund only for taxes. Today, right now, other than the pipe dream of the $300 million, Your Honor, there is absolutely no debt service funding dedicated anymore, and that includes the prison, because those were both based on the fact that we would just use the ability now of the $60+ million anticipated in EITC funding with the government of Guam would be discretionary for us to set up for appropriation. That no longer exists. That comes as a trust fund from the federal government, untouchable. So it cannot be appropriated for any other purpose. Now, we'll give relief to the general fund, but literally right now, all the exercise we went to when we were appropriating that 35 and that $5 million for under EITC for the hospital and for debt service for the hospital and for the prison is gone. That will require a straightaway new bill, either under the Budget Act or under a standalone for both of those entities to be able to have a dedicated funding source for debt service.
Very interesting, Chris. Well, Chris, I'm glad to hear that you're not going anywhere. You're going to stick around for a while.
Well, if anything, it will just be to live out my days and listen to Tall Tales.
Yeah. Well, I figure I only got 17 more years here on the island. I'm going to enjoy every single one of them.
Oh, good enough. Well, when I have a barbecue at the ranch, I'm going to have you and Mom and the family come down.
Sounds like a winner. See you later, Chris. Okay, we got to take a short break, huh? Okay.
Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Okay, so here we are. We got about 10 more minutes before the big halftime show. I'm going to spend a little time going through and seeing what the folks on Facebook said. It's been a really active day on Facebook.
It's very entertaining on Facebook.
Yeah. So let's see, where should I start? How about Gina Marie Tenorio Call? Bob, you know that many are planning on leaving due to the high cost of living and the low wages here. Gary Myers, yep. And then Gina says, there's a comment here. He said nothing about Congress because he is, and then Gina Marie Tenorio Call, broken record syndrome. And Jose comes along and says, that's okay if people flee the island. We have Chinese immigrants landing daily on our shores. They'll take over, right? And let's see. Our governor is not even concerned about the Chinese landing on the island. And then I've got M.T. Fairren. He says, no one is good enough for Bob. Ayaday. And then Jose replies to that. What is it? What did you say, Jose?
Your high expectations are a tall order.
Or a tall order. No deed. No kidding. Yeah. And then Benidoso Tauto just checks in and Let's see, Lanny Salas checks in. And Benito Tautau so tired of hearing people make comments as if they are in the same shoes. Social media makes people stupid, as if government of Guam isn't corrupt. Nothing will get better till we start breaking away from the same politicians tied to the same familias. I can't say that I disagree with Benedetto.
Don't cry for me, Benedetto.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see. Bonnie Suba comes back and says, absolutely correct. Then I've got Ellen Longuerro. I got into a profession that makes it possible for me and my family to stay on island. My husband and I decided that we're not going to raise our kids in the States because of the difference in morals and values. Well, I hope you're right, Ellen. But from what we're reading about the States, I think you got a really good plan there.
But it seems like we're importing some of that.
Yeah, we're way behind, thank goodness. Lonnie Salas and then Bonnie Suba. What is the governor doing about that? I believe there are spies to spy on Guam's infrastructure. He's talking about the Chinese. The people that are stealing ashore. Jose Martinez, there are two Guams. Maybe it's because governor also owns the company store. Where's Tennessee Ernie now that we really need him? I owe my soul to the company store.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Gina Marie Tenorio Call, it helps when you have a governor who wants to work with the legislature and the congressional delegate get things done for the benefit of the people of Guam. And Troy Torres comes along and says, I'm now voting for Chris Duenas. Does that mean he wasn't going to vote for him before? I'm now voting for Chris Duenas. He said, a word I can't say on the air, and kept it real. So your vocabulary, Chris, has won a voter for you, but please let's not use that campaign tactic on Tall Tales again, if it's okay.
The FCC allows taki.
Yeah, usa palabra taki. Lo tada bata like gifino English. Let's see. And then here's a reply to Ellen Leon Guerrero from Bonnie. True, Elena. But the sad truth is Lou's administration is bringing to Guam that immorality and disregard for the value of human life. I'm not telling you to move, but like other countries, people need to gather and form a bond and fight back. Right on, Bonnie. And Elizabeth Mendiola Kisiso is here. Gina Marie Call. Boy, Gina Marie is prolific. Lou is about power and control, so she can capitalize from her time to manage the millions of federal dollars that are streaming into her bank. Robert O'Malley, Michael San Nicolas was just using the address as a campaign and debate stage. Well, yeah, he was, but I'm going to hold on to that until I get around to my evaluation. Michael said, let's see, Gina Marie Call comes back and says the governor did as well. There's a certain tit for tat element there. Yeah. A tu quoque phenomenon. And then Mike San Nicolas was just, and then Jose Martinez comes back and says the same thing. And then Lonnie, I met a friend before attending the congressional address. I'm voting Lou because I'm related to her. Oh, my. That's a really good reason to vote for Lou, right? Robert O'Malley is back. Gina Marie Call. No, she wasn't. Okay. So Gina Marie Cole and Robert O'Malley are going to have their own little preliminary match here leading up to the main event. And let's see. Ellen Land Guerrero, governors will come and go. It's my job as a parent to make sure my kids will be taught morals and values. The government doesn't dictate what is taught in my home. It ends and starts with me and my husband. It's tempting to leave because my profession is lucrative out there. We can always go out there for vacation. Plus, Guam is home. Harvey Egna, there is a distinct conflict of interest taking place that no one discusses in the open. BOG is a $2 billion bank. The governor is keeping $300 million on deposit, thus significantly boosting the book value of the bank. That $300 million equates to 15% of the bank's assets. Well, I think deposits are actually liabilities, aren't they? Yeah, it's money you owe your depositors. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that, and I kind of bought into that too. And I haven't done a whole lot of research. I probably should, but I saw somewhere that the national government will fine banks that keep those kinds of deposits in the bank too long. And then I also heard that the Bank of Guam is the only bank on island big enough to do the banking for the government of Guam, that they've asked for proposals before, and none of the other banks, which of course are much, much smaller, bid. So good research project there for somebody. I've got a pretty full plate already, so I think I'll have to pass that on. And let's see. Robert O'Malley, absolutely. She did, and why not? It's an election year. Then Jose Martinez, say no to abortion. The most aggressive pro-abortionist in office. No, thank you. And then Gina Marie is back. It's bound to happen, but at least the congressman gave a dose of reality to the people and shared what he believes is the way forward. All right, let's break for the big halftime show, and we'll come back to the next speech.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A judge halts enforcement of Arizona's new personhood law. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, saying the law is too murky and too vague and subject to arbitrary enforcement. A federal judge has issued an injunction blocking enforcement of the law, which grants to fetuses in the womb the same rights as any person in the state. Arizona's Attorney General Mark Brnovich says he'll ask the federal appeals court to set aside that ruling. A judge in Utah has granted Planned Parenthood's request to delay the implementation of that state's new ban on virtually all abortions until the group's challenge to the law can be heard. In Minnesota, a judge has ruled the state's abortion restrictions, including parental notification and the 24-hour waiting period, violate the Minnesota state constitution, and he's ordered them not to be enforced. Abortion will be on the ballot in Michigan this November after a petition drive.
Pro-choice supporters try to work around Michigan's 1931 abortion ban that went dormant in 1973 that pro-life supporters say is back in place.
The people of Michigan are turning in 753,759 signatures to enshrine into the state constitution the right to reproductive freedom.
Shanae Watson-Whitaker lawmaker with a Reproductive Freedom for All campaign handing the decision to voters this fall. And as the abortion battle still also plays out in Michigan courts.
Fox's Jeff Manasso. President Biden leaves late this evening on his Middle East trip that will see him visit Israel, the Palestinian territory, and Saudi Arabia. The White House says the president will not directly ask Saudi leaders to increase their oil output to bring down world oil prices, but National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says
he intends to use every tool in his toolbox to try to create adequate global energy supplies and to bring the price of gas down for American working families at the pump.
Prior to departure, the president will meet with Mexico's President Lopez Obrador at the White House. America is listening to Fox News.
First, I want to thank you all for being with us today. Josh and I wouldn't be here without your friendship and your support. Especially the campaign supporters in every village throughout the island who have joined in our effort to keep Guam moving forward.
Our leadership has seen our people through the most frightening pandemic that our generation has ever seen. And it is about to see the most vibrant comeback of an economy in the most developed island here in the Western Pacific.
With your help and your vote, we will move forward as one people. And Josh and I will always be there for every single person and family on Guam.
And I approve this message.
A July heat wave making much of the Southwest, especially Texas.
Yeah, areas of Texas. I mean, they've seen a number of consecutive days with above normal temperatures, a lot of days setting record highs. And really, it's just going to continue for at least the next 5-6 days.
National Weather Service meteorologist Tony Fracasso, the Texas Energy Reliability Council, is asking residents in Texas to conserve electricity during the heat wave, warning there could be rolling blackouts otherwise. What's cooling off? The real estate market after multiple bumps in interest rates.
Redfin says roughly 60,000 home purchase agreements fell through in June. That's about 15% of homes that went under contract last month. That's the highest rate the U.S. has seen since March and April of 2020, when much of the country was going into pandemic lockdown. Some people forced to renege on deals because of higher mortgage rates. Others think a slowing housing market means they can negotiate a better price. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz urging the Senate's Judiciary Committee to call Attorney General Merrick Garland in to explain why the Justice Department has so far declined to enforce laws banning the intimidation of Supreme Court justices. There are suggestions the DOJ may begin an investigation into the PGA.
According to the Wall Street Journal, officials with the department's antitrust division have contacted several players' agents. The PGA Tour has suspended golfers for competing in live events. Tour policy requires members receive a conflicting event release to play overseas tournaments when a tour event is also held. The tour denied releases for the first live event outside London, England. Tour officials see the Saudi-funded series as a threat. Officials added the tour underwent a similar 1994 probe with the Federal Trade Commission. They said they expect a similar outcome. Bob Mortale, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Hafa-day, Patsy Gogri from Security Title here with information about what a title company does.
The title side of our business determines who owns the property and guarantees your ownership with a title insurance policy. The escrow side acts as an independent third party, managing the transfer of money and documents between the buyer, seller, lenders, and others. Security Title has the management of real estate closings down to a science. Give us a call. We are here to help.
Okay, so here we are after that big halftime show that we all like so much. I'm going to pick up the post coverage of the San Nicolas speech, and we're going to evaluate coverage before we evaluate speech. Delegate puts spotlight on high cost of living, bad policies. Delegate Michael San Nicolas on Monday night said Guam's economy has taken a turn for the worse because of local policies, and took a jab at the governor for allegedly discounting the delegate's role in bringing in more than $1 billion in federal pandemic funds to Guam. San Nicolas is challenging Governor Leon Guerrero in the upcoming Democratic gubernatorial primaries. We're not in economic recovery mode, he said. We're simply climbing out of the rubble of bad policy that we've been buried under because our economic activity and outlook has not actually improved, and rising tourism numbers are compromised by reduced purchasing power. San Nicolas painted a gloomy picture of Guam, a direct contrast to the governor's recent State of the Island address, where she said Guam is moving forward and is getting stronger every day. So we're what? 4 paragraphs into the coverage of San Nicolas's speech, and we've already gotten to the governor's rebuttal, Jose?
I guess so.
Yeah. One would think if this was all you knew, you would think that the governor was standing beside.
Actually, in the hard copy, the rebuttal happened right after the headline, the byline. Delegate puts spotlight on high cost of living, bad policies. Governor says speech not hopeful.
Yeah.
They couldn't help themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, if he said bad things about the governor, well, they've got to come back the other way, right? But Daily Guam Post, you're covering San Nicolas's speech. That's what you're covering. We can draw our own conclusions, make our own comparisons. The article goes on to say the delegate used a big portion of his congressional address, his last one, to criticize the governor's policies and procedures as the August primaries near. Next sentence. The governor later told reporters that San Nicolas' speech was not one of hope, but rather of defeat. It was not a leader of optimism. It's a leader of negativism. And right now, I think because our people are feeling a lot better about returning to work to some normalcy, we can't tear them down. We need to work with them and lift them up. And I did not hear that in this message, the governor said. So far, if you were to count earned media, I'd say it's about 60-40 with San Nicolas at the 60, and the governor's got about 40% of the coverage.
Was she the Democratic response?
Yeah. She believes San Nicolas was very insensitive to the Guam legislature for saying that Guam should use all federal funds and totally discredit senators for trying to help the people of Guam with the Local Employers Assistance Program, or LEAP, and other programs. Less than 3 minutes into his address, San Nicolas said in video footage of the governor addressing a crowd, the governor purportedly said, now if you're there, you saw the video, it's no purportedly about it. Federal aid would have come to Guam regardless of who the congressional government delegate is. These statements are dangerous not because of the political season, but because it reduces the expectations our people should have of their congressional office, San Nicolas said, before pointing to his efforts at making sure Guam and other territories are included in the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program and other pandemic relief. Next sentence, a small section of a massive bill, he said, saved our island. This is the significance of your congressional office and should never be forgotten. San Nicolas also shared that Deloitte, a premier accounting firm in the nation, is pulling out of Guam. Now, that's some real news. Bad news. And it just means that there isn't enough money for the counters to count.
Is Ernst & Young still on Guam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know they're a small office here, but...
Yeah. Deloitte's the big guys. When a firm like this pulls out, it means that the outlook of business environment of Guam is not going to get better and likely to get worse, and it makes better sense for them to leave. The governor said San Nicolas' address was very disappointing and not hopeful for the island. He tore down any progress we have made toward economic recovery and totally demeaned the people of Guam in terms of struggling hard, working together, etc. We're having a good economic recovery, and to say that we're not, I think, is a disconnect with the people of Guam. The governor, who's seeking re-election, said she's a bit insulted. Whoa.
Wait, the governor is what?
A bit insulted.
Oh, seeking re-election too?
Uh-huh.
I had to put that in.
Yeah, she's a bit insulted by this message for the people of Guam. Do we need to break out the Don't Cry for Me Argentina video again, Jose? She's a bit insulted. San Nicolas also said that the governor continues to hoard over $300 million in American Rescue Plan funds while people are suffering. Quote, folks, when a gallon of milk is more than 2 times as expensive as a gallon of gas, and our gas is already crazy expensive, it doesn't take a complex economic analysis to determine that a local source is needed, and it would be sustainable and economical if the basic infrastructure was in place. San Nicolas, who suggested developing a dairy industry. I don't think you can't pour milk into the gas tank of your car and burn it, can you, Jose? I don't think milk even burns.
No.
Now, you younger fellas don't remember this, but we had a dairy in Tinian at one time. Yeah. Ken Jones, I think it was the Bar Tea or something like that on Tinian. And beef. So you could get Tinian beef and milk from Tinian. But he ran into a couple of problems with the milk. One was that the milk had to be flown down. And, you know, the shelf life of fresh milk isn't really long. So sometimes he would lose the milk. And then the other one was this. Back for a long, long time, when you went to Payless, or when you went to J&G Payless and bought milk, and you bought what I thought was called Blue Shoe. I've ever told that story on the air once before. Blue Seal milk. It was filled milk. So you took milk powder at the factory, milk powder, and mix it with water and coconut oil to give it a certain consistency, because there was no fresh milk. And it was called and it was it. That was it. People got so used to filled milk, when they actually got fresh milk, they said, you know, this doesn't taste right. So it was a marketing problem. Yeah. Yeah, so San Nicolas wants to start a dairy industry here on the island. I don't know about that. The delegate once again criticized the governor's plan to allocate portions of the ARP funds to help build a new hospital. He said there's no way Guam will be able to obligate and then spend the ARP money to build a hospital by 2024, 2026 deadlines, respectively. The governor said a hospital will be built in less than 4 years. The delegate said there needs to be honesty about the difference between how things look and how things are, considering the high cost of living, inflation, tourist arrivals that are nowhere near pandemic numbers, and bad policies. To drive his point, he read a Guam Daily Post story about a family of 12 leaving Guam for good because of the harsh economic realities on the island that make it hard for families to survive. San Nicolas also laid out his plans and proposals to help lower the cost of living on Guam, and outlined the congressional bills he introduced to benefit Guam. Whoever wins between Leon Guerrero and San Nicolas and the Democrat primaries will face off against Republican ticket of former Governor Felix Camacho and Senator Tony Abbott. Now, there's one more paragraph that I'm going to hang on to for a second. So up until this point, given the back and forth, the go-between, instead of covering San Nicolas's speech and then the governor's response in a separate article, which would have seemed to be the way to do it if you're really covering the governor's speech, the way this article came out, if San Nicolas hadn't showed up, the Post still could have written the article. It really didn't need San Nicolas there to put all of the governor's points into print. So do I detect a certain pro-Leon Guerrero bias in this article? I do. And here's the capper. Now, the article was about San Nicolas's speech. Here's the last paragraph of the article. San Nicolas's address also comes days after the U.S. House Committee on Ethics voted to send his ethics case and report to the Department of Justice for alleged violations of federal laws and allegedly trying to cover them up. So the Daily Post put a horse's head on the foot of San Nicolas's. This article is all about San Nicolas's speech. What are you going to remember out of this speech, out of this article?
Everything the governor retorted with.
And the last
paragraph.
The last paragraph, yeah, which was not part. You know, it's true. It's not a snipe. It's not a smear. It's just not appropriate in the article about his speech.
Now, this reporter didn't write the last one when the governor gave hers, but the last article that reported on the governor's State of the Island address was only about the governor. There was no interjection of what anybody else said, either later on that night or later on the next day.
It was all the governor all the time, huh? All right. Okay, next I've got, shortly after the speech was all over, All In, the governor's campaign published this. Delegate Michael San Nicolas took a time-honored tradition, the State of Congress address, and turned it into a speech that tore down the people of Guam instead of lifting them up, said Rory Respicio, campaign co-chair of the committee to re-elect Governor Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio. I'm surprised Rory said that because it looks to me like it's a personnel matter, Jose. And Rory is prohibited from talking about personnel matters. True to form, Delegate San Nicolas took only 3 minutes to turn his final congressional address into attack on Governor Leon Guerrero, Respicio said, and we cannot help but notice the glaring omission as to why San Nicolas is not returning to Congress. The condemnation by the Congressional Ethics Commission and referral to the Department of Justice for financial campaign irregularities. San Nicolas threw up a smokescreen by listing all Leon Guerrero administration's accomplishments during the pandemic and claiming them as his own, and playing a 2-year-old video of a fellow Democrat praising him. That was Auntie Maxine, by the way. Auntie Maxine appointed Michael as the vice chair of the Committee on Finance, and she has kind words to say about Michael. He's really good at throwing rocks through windows. He's a great arsonist. And the hell with the Supreme Court.
Oh, that Maxine.
Beep, beep. Yeah. No, that's not what she said. She said nice things about Michael. St. Nicholas had no message of encouragement for our people or to them. Instead, his message focused on discrediting our island's work to move forward. I wonder if the same person wrote this that wrote the speech. There's an awful similarity here. His speech scolded, admonished. That's my job, isn't it? Scolding and admonishing, Jose? Admonished and told people that we should spend all of our federal money now as opposed to using a portion for sustainable investments in our island's collective future, said Respicio. Blaming others, reading an entire newspaper article during a speech you were supposed to prepare for the people of Guam, and attempting to take credit for all the efforts of hardworking employees of our local government who have done their best to get federal and local funds out to our people, but also at a time in which we must encourage our people to look forward and help them recover and rebuild. These are not the traits of a true leader. Yeah. Okay, so
I have a question.
Sir.
This has to do with electioneering and working for Gov Guam. What is Respicio's position in Luleon Guerrero's campaign?
He's the, what did I say, campaign vice chair?
Vice chair of the campaign.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time compromising my head of a director in charge of a port or any other agency being the head or even a vice head of a campaign.
Yeah.
I feel bad for those workers, port employee workers, who can't put a ADA campaign sticker on their car or a San Nicolas campaign sticker on their car for fear of their jobs. And don't think that it's not unreal.
Certainly. Well, we do have laws dealing with political activities, and it applies to all employees. However, the definition of employee does not apply to people appointed and confirmed.
Yeah, and to me, that's just the...
So you see that as a failure in the law.
Absolutely, it's a big failure, and it's a technicality that it's a what do they call it? A distinction without a difference.
Yeah, it is, because if you want to ship something at the port, you really aren't interested in whether or not the director is the Republican, or you just want to get it done. And then, of course, these political activity statutes are supposed to protect employees, but it's a real world we live in. So, maybe what we ought to do is just say, if you're in the government, you run an agency, stay out of politics. Good idea, Jose. Okay, I've got Andy on the line. He wants to talk about MSN versus governor and the MSN investigation. Then after that, we'll start our evaluation of the speech. Good afternoon, Andy.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for taking my call. I called a couple of weeks back, and I enjoyed the experience. I wanted to do it twice.
Oh, good for you.
Hey, I don't know about all these investigations. I'm going to let the apparatus be the apparatus and tell us what happened, what didn't happen. I hear a lot of shifting narratives. I see some smoke screens. They talked about that from Respicio, but those smoke screens seem to be coming out of that loop, and they don't seem to be coming from other places. For instance, this is what I mean. If we're to believe it's $13,000 worth of contributions that are hidden in some kind of ceiling tile, and that's an egregious offense, and if that's against the law, then that's an egregious offense. That's not the matter. Well, what is 300 million or whatever number she got from the federal government sitting in a bank here in Guam that she has a financial and fiduciary interest in? Is that a normal conflict, or am I just a guy that listens?
Well, I would say this: if it were me, and I had $300 million, and I knew that I wasn't going to spend it for a couple of years, I would not leave it in a checking account. That's for sure. $300 million would draw a fair amount of interest, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely would.
By the way, Harvey Agna and I are a little back and forth here about the Bank of Guam, and people have said that the Bank of Guam is drawing interest on that $300 million. And I said, I have read somewhere that the national government will charge you interest if you hold on to that money in a deposit account too long. And then second, I've also understand that there's no bank on the island that's big enough to handle the Gov Guam account. And when the Department of Administration, Director of Administration has gone out looking for proposals, none of the local banks will touch it. Well, and then the posters come back and say, Bank of Hawaii is bigger than Bank of Guam. First Hawaiian Bank is bigger than Guam. Well, yeah, worldwide. But I think what we're talking about is the Guam branch, because banking is, licensing is primarily a state function. So I suspect that the Bank of Guam branch is bigger than either First Hawaiian or Bank of Hawaii. But it doesn't sit very well, does it, Andy, to see all of that money sitting in her bank with...
Yeah, it doesn't sit well at all, and it's so unpalatable that, like all things in our crazy world right now, it's like the veil's been pulled off of everything, and there's all of this progressive talk, and they obfuscate the truth, and they kind of say, that guy's doing what I'm doing, but I'm going to say that guy's doing it, and instead, so that it gets the fire off of me. It's $300 million versus 13,000. If those are the bare bones of the facts, then, oh my gosh, you better not say anything. You better just hide and pretend like nobody notices.
Well, on San Nicolas situation in Congress, I did about a 20-minute workup on it, and without going into what he did or what he didn't do, the procedure is, you wonder where they found all those kangaroos in Washington to hold it. Yeah, because there's nothing, there was nothing even-handed or fair about it. And then when they wound up, their report said that there is substantial evidence to show that. Now, substantial evidence sounds like heavy duty. Oh, wow, substantial evidence to a layman. But lawyers will tell you that's the lowest possible standard of proof. Highest is beyond a reasonable doubt. Next is clear and convincing evidence. Next is preponderance of the evidence, and then substantial comes next. So beyond a reasonable doubt is 90 to 100. Clear and convincing over 70. Preponderance of the evidence is 51, and substantial is down around 30. So, it's not something that you ride around town hollering, hey, substantial evidence. And the Department of Justice, if that's all there is, the Department of Justice is not going to go for an indictment on substantial evidence. It's not enough for an indictment. But the other side has taken that and pulled the quotes out of it and everything and made a lot out of it. And I'm kind of like you. I think it's much ado over nothing in some respects.
I mean, I'm well read. I had no idea about that. When I say things like substantial in my world, those are big things.
It sounds big. Yeah,
would be a problem, and we should sort it out. But you're telling me it's 30%.
Yeah,
that makes this whole situation more laughable. One last thing, and I'll let you get back to your show. It's a great show. Thanks for listening. I think for once, and I'm not going to say who I'm going to vote for this year or at all, period, because it's nobody's business out there. It's mine. But for once, I finally feel like I'm hearing in Guam after, a decade or more of living here, somebody talking about the problems that Guamanians and Chamorros and Filipinos and the Outer Islanders are having in Guam. I haven't heard that out of Guadalupe. I've heard a lot of bell ringing and I've heard a lot of pony dancing, but I haven't heard, what are we going to do? I haven't heard questions like that. I haven't heard from senators. I haven't heard it from news media. It's very sad. And we are suffering here in Guam, and it's time to somebody to answer those questions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy. I can't do this all by myself. I need a little help from those guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob.
Good talking to you, Andy. Okay, we're going to take a short break here. We're going to head for Wrigley Field in the 7th inning stretch. When we come back, we'll have none other than the most dangerous man in the room.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Okay, so here we are at Wrigley Field in Chicago, and I'm going to do the same thing with St. Nicholas's speech that I did with Governor Leon Guerrero's speech. I'm going to start out and talk about the visuals and the delivery aspect of the speech. And you'll recall that I gave Governor Leon Guerrero really high marks on her speech. She looked good, she sounded good, her gestures were right, everything about the delivery was good. She could have stood up there and read her grandma's recipe for oatmeal cookies, and it would have been a really good speech. Michael St. Nicholas, not so much. As I mentioned earlier, his pacing was such that I just can't listen that fast. You know, maybe if I were 20 years younger, I could listen faster, but I just couldn't listen that fast. And Jose, I think you had a comparison of something.
It reminded me of a 1980s toy commercial I used to watch as a kid called Micro Machines. And the Micro Machine man talked really fast. Also, all the pharmaceutical commercials have that guy at the end of the commercial giving the disclaimer.
There are many side effects for this drug. It may cause headache, nausea, throwing up. You may have to go to the toilet more often. You may not like it very much. You may have a stomach ache. It may cause the cancer. You may cause the sudden death. One of those, right?
Sold.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And that has to do with coaching. That has to do with preparing before a speech.
Right. Yeah, so that part wasn't good. Now, one way to give a speech is tell the people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Start out by saying, I have 5 points that I want to make tonight, or 7, or whatever, and they are. And then go through in that order. Michael's speech was more like a stream of consciousness, like he started, like it was Jack Kerouac, if you ever read the book On the Road. So it was a great book in the 60s. It was about the Beat generation. And it was a popular book. One of the critics said it wasn't writing, it was typing. It just started at the beginning, it just type. And that's kind of, Michael just kind of started talking.
It was his first draft.
Yeah, and talked until he finally got to the end without any real verbal subheadings or breaks or any way of kind of keeping track of what it was that he was talking about. Then he covered so much, you know, and is it better? I'll tell you my answer to this. Is it better to talk about fewer things and be very, very clear about the things you're talking about? Or is it better to talk about a whole lot of things, even though what you're saying may not be that clear?
Now, understand, a lot of people maybe connected to what he was saying as far as sentiment goes.
Mm-hmm.
But like I told you earlier, I was not prepared to listen to someone read a technical manual, and I felt like that's what it was happening.
Yeah,
yeah. And this is not from anything that we heard today. I actually text you in the middle of the speech to let you know that this might sound like a bedtime story.
It did. Well, I'll go back to the Abraham Lincoln quote. Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, Ottawa, Illinois, 21 August 1858. Here's what Abe said. With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions. He makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to be executed. Michael didn't mold much public sentiment last night. It was not that kind of speech at all. Governor Leon Guerrero did with her speech at the end. She did. And I think in that forum, now, you know, they both were throwing political brickbats back and forth. And they are candidates for governor. They are, you know, it is a life or death, political life or death battle for them. And I suppose it would be very difficult for a person to convince himself, I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to engage in a back and forth political match with my opponent. And I think we have to kind of expect that that's the way it's going to turn out. But I think that if Michael had attempted to mold public sentiment instead of kind of doing advertisement for Michael San Nicolas, he could have got the rest of his points out at another occasion. But when you have people in an audience in a relatively small room looking at you, watching you on the overhead screens, you actually have the ability to connect with those people. And if you are going to be a good political speaker, connecting with people is everything. It's not just something, it's everything. And oftentimes you don't have that many chances, but here was a golden opportunity for him to connect with the people. But instead, he made a lot of points, and I agree with a lot of the points that he made. I'm just talking about, not talking content now, I'm talking delivery and packaging. So I'm going to have to give the governor much higher marks on packaging than I give Michael San Nicolas for last night.
Well, there's the other part about packaging that I'm going to give Michael San Nicolas points for.
Okay.
Although he criticized the governor in the sense that he gave himself credit for the federal funds as well, where she did not.
Yeah.
At the end of the speech, he thanked both the governor and lieutenant governor for creating the programs locally that were able to distribute the funds.
Yeah.
Something Lou never did in her address. And then two, although it was a long speech, it's kind of hard to encapsulate that in a picture to say, oh, this speech was long, except for if you caught somebody yawning. But at the very end, Lou Leon Guerrero and Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio and the first man or first husband, I don't know what we call him.
The first gentleman.
First gentleman. Yeah. They remained seated and did not clap or applaud where everybody else was standing and applauding. Just a bit of decorum should have happened, but that is a photo op and a lasting memory, I think, more than a long, drawn-out speech.
And everybody's talking about it. Yeah. Well, you got to remember, television is a visual medium. So everything you do on TV, you should do it as though you're sitting in your front room in front of your husband or wife or girlfriend or whatever, and you want to present yourself in the best possible light. So, yeah. So that's an important observation, Jose, that I don't know that it's a matter of decorum as much as perhaps a matter of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, not comedy, but comity. It's kind of a reciprocal exchange of politeness.
It was almost one step away from ripping up his speech at the end. It wasn't quite Pelosi.
Well, they are Democrats after all. That's what Democrats do. Yeah. Okay, so let's hear what our Carl's got to say about this, about the speeches here. Tell me more, our Carl.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to chime in about that $300 million, the infamous $300 million that's being held in the bank, actually. And, I just had the thought that the longer they hold on to that money, the more this inflation is chewing it up. I calculated, and roughly based on, I think it was like over 8%, 8.5%, or maybe even 9% inflation rate per year, maybe beyond that by now. But say it's 9%. In 1 year, if it's $300 million, that's $27 million in buying power. It's like taking $27 million out in the middle of a field, dousing it with gasoline, and just setting it on fire. And that's the people's money. That's not the governor's money. It's not anyone else's money. That's our money. That's supposed to go for our needs. And the longer they hold on to that, the worse it gets. And that's just in a single year. Imagine, if they do that 2 years, 3 years, it's losing value every single year that happens. As far as Michael St. Nicholas, I voted for him twice, even though I tend to vote Republican, although my Republican vote total has gone way, way down after the one-pat 10. That changed my whole voting pattern. But I've just been disappointed, with his use of identity politics, especially with the insular cases. He jumped on the bandwagon that Underwood and Berdalio were on, America unfair and America racist and all that stuff. So that was a big disappointment. And then now he's talking about capping gas prices, which is another big disappointment because price controls don't work, and you know that. It's been used for hundreds of years. The Romans used it as their empire was collapsing, trying to prop it up, and when they keep printing money, they dilutes the value of every other dollar that's out there circulating. And they recently printed, within a 2-3 year period, more money than had ever been printed in the entire history of America. So anyway, I may still vote for him. I don't know, but I'm kind of eyeing the field. Now, Lou is definitely a no-go. The Leon Guerrero team that can't happen because of how she threw the private sector under the bus and how she treated the economy, basically thinking you can turn off the economy like a light switch and then flip it back on. And we're finding out it's a lot harder than that. But anyway, those are just my comments.
Well, as usual, we appreciate your comments, our Carl. That's why we still refer to you as the most dangerous man in the room. Lucky for both Leon Guerrero and San Nicolas, you are not over there giving a speech. Because then no one would pay any attention to them at all. So good call,
I don't know about that.
Good call, our Carl. So that's our Carl. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, see what's going on in Louisville.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch, 6 furlongs more, and I'll be crossing the finish line and riding out of here, coming back tomorrow. Next item on the card is Frank Uggan versus Lou. You remember Frank Uggan? Frank Uggan ran against Lou in the Democrat Party. Frank Uggan ran against Lou in a cast of thousands in the Democrat Party 4 years ago and lost by a couple of hundred votes. A strong candidate. Frank has always been a strong political candidate. But the unfortunate thing is that if you kind of set your path from a young age to become governor, and when you finally get to the finish line and you're second instead of first, there isn't much place for you to go. So both Frank Uggan and Ray Tenorio were on that career path to wind up on top of the hill. Neither one of them made it, and both of them wound up taking a one-way ticket to Palookaville. Tenorio's never been back. I suspect he never will be. Frank Uggan's back on the island now, and here's an article that ran in the Post. Former Democrat gubernatorial candidate waves for, but has not endorsed Republican team. Former Senator Frank Uggan, who lost the 2018 Democrat gubernatorial primaries to Governor Leon Guerrero and joined the Republican gubernatorial ticket of former Governor Felix Camacho and Senator Tony Atta at a roadside wave by the Agana Shopping Center in Hagatna Monday morning. But after media inquiries, the campaign issued a statement clarifying that Uggan has not endorsed the Camacho-Atta team. Photos of the event show Uggan standing beside Camacho and Atta while the three waved at passing motorists. Uggan also was holding a round Camacho-Atta campaign sign in those photos. There were photos from Friday showing Uggan and Camacho with Atta. There were also photos from Friday showing Uggan and Camacho with Atta. Quote, former Senator Frank Uggan has not endorsed the Camacho-Atta team. I got to stop here and wonder, I know how to endorse a check. Is that what they're talking about?
I don't know. You normally don't have to declare you're endorsing a check when you endorse a check.
Exactly.
People just know you did because of your action.
So would a really good reporter walk around behind Governor Camacho and say, Governor, would you mind pulling up your shirt? I want to see your back. I want to see if Frank Uggan signed his name on your back, because you guys are saying he didn't endorse you. And, you know, when he's out there waving on a public highway with you guys in a photo op for all the media here on the island, that seems to me like he's saying vote for Camacho-Atta. But now there's this story that he's not endorsing. Quote, former Senator Frank Uggan has not endorsed the Camacho-Atta team, the statement read in part. The campaign continues to bring together residents from all across the island to include Senator Uggan to support the movement to bring leadership back to Adelup. The statement went on to say that Uggan was generous with his time, waving with his longtime friends. The Camacho-Atta team encourages more of their friends and supporters to engage the campaign and participate in activities like the one this morning. Thank you, Senator Uggan, for spending time with Felix and Tony. A statement from the Republican Party read, Uggan and Leon Guerrero were among the 4 Democrat gubernatorial candidates in the 2018 primaries. The other 2 were Senator Dennis Rodriguez Jr. and former Governor Carl Gutierrez. Rodriguez recently became Leon Guerrero's chief advisor on health care. Now, that's a switch, because I characterize Rodriguez as an anti-abortion kind of guy. I think he sponsored some anti-abortion legislation.
Is he going to say he doesn't endorse Leon Guerrero?
We haven't seen any pictures of him with Leanne Guerrero.
I've seen stickers on vehicles, but that doesn't necessarily mean an endorsement.
Not necessarily.
In the Book of Uggan.
Now, were the stickers on the backs of the cars?
They were on the backs of the cars.
Not the front, but the
Not
back.
the front, the back.
Well, it could have been an endorsement then. Yeah, but you know the old saying, politics makes strange benefits. Strange bedfellows. Yeah, Rodriguez, the anti-abortion guy, now being the chief advisor on health care to the Red Queen. I wonder if he's saying, Governor, the best health advice I can give you is don't keep encouraging people to kill babies in the womb. It's bad for the babies. I don't think he wants to have a horse's head on the foot of his bed. After the 2018 Democrat primaries, Uggan sought a recount, considering Leon Guerrero's 260-vote lead over him. Man, that was close. The Guam Election Commission did not do a recount, saying the recount threshold is a vote difference of 2%, while the actual vote difference at the time between Leon Guerrero and Uggan was 3.1%. Uggan and his running mate, former U.S. Attorney Alicia Limtiaco, actively campaigned as a write-in during the 2018 general elections. Total write-in votes at the time were high, 22.8% of the votes cast. Leon Guerrero Tenorio got 50.79%. God, so Frank came so close. Twice, huh? Or actually, that would have been so close for Tenorio if Lou had dropped below 50%. There would have been a runoff between Leon Guerrero and Tenorio. The total votes cast in the gubernatorial race, while then Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio and then former Senator Tony Atta got 26.39% of the vote. 26% of the vote. You know why? You know what really hurt Tenorio? He got the NRA endorsement. NRA, anybody who's as quick on the draw as Ray Tenorio is our kind of guy. Join the National Rifle Association. Okay, so much for that item. What do I got? Seven more minutes, huh? Okay. I got another one here. Another somebody against Governor Leon Guerrero. That's what you get when you run for re-election. And stop and think about re-election. You know, you run for governor, you run for senator, you do it once, you give it your best, and you wonder, what is this running for re-election? Well, I think anyone who runs once has got it in his head, I got to run again, because if I run again and I'm reelected, it's an endorsement of the job I did in my first term. But if you run for reelection and run for election and run for reelection and you're not reelected, it's kind of like a thumbs down on your first term. Now, Tina Rose Munga Barnes has written a book about running for reelection after she's gotten beat. She's lost twice. And she's come back both times. And conventional wisdom would hold if you run for re-election and lose, you're probably over. Politics is over for you, but not for Tina Rose Munga Barnes.
Or you got some votes from those in the cemeteries.
Yeah, well, I hope that we haven't gotten to that point yet here on the island. Next item on the card: Felix versus Lou. Camacho slams governor on illegal alien response. Former Governor Felix Camacho and his gubernatorial running mate, Senator Tony Atta, issued a statement today slamming Governor Leon Guerrero for her handling of illegal immigration into Guam lately. According to a story by Nick Delgado in the Post, Customs, this is a candid story, Customs Director Ike Pareto said over the past 7 months, undocumented Chinese nationals have been entering the island by boat. These boats have landed at Ritidian, Tangeesan Beach, Tumum Bay, the Hagatna Boat Basin, and Talafofo. And waters below Two Lovers Point. According to Mr. Delgado's story, the undocumented immigrants came to Guam from the CNMI, were allowed conditional entry into the island. They were released into the community. We are, quote, we are offended by the Leon Guerrero administration's appalling position and lack of action on undocumented Chinese nationals who have entered the U.S. territory from beaches in Jigo, Tumum, Hagatna, and Tamuning. The statement from Camacho Ada campaign states, this news and the response of Customs and Leon Guerrero administration should give every resident great pause. The lack of law enforcement at a time when great uncertainty in the Western Pacific. Well, I may not have time to go to the bottom of this, but this is what I think has happened. People were able to come to the CNMI on what are called visa waivers. They didn't need to have visas. If they had Chinese passports, they could be admitted short term for the CNMI. When they got there, they applied for political asylum. Well, the U.S. immigration folks don't have the political asylum mechanism in Saipan, so they were kind of stuck there. But they could remain in Saipan. They wouldn't be able to board a plane to the mainland because we have a pre-clearance system in our airport, so that before you get on the plane, you show your passport, et cetera, showing that you're admissible into Hawaii. Well, these people are waiting for political asylum, aren't able to show those kinds of credentials, so they're stuck. And in their case, they were stuck on Saipan, so they wouldn't be able to get on a plane and fly down here. So they borrowed Huckleberry Finn's raft and came down that way. And according to the news stories, probably looking for something to do, some kind of work or something. And so as far as I see it, they didn't break any laws, although there is a law against making an uninspected entry into the United States, but that's not for territorial officials to enforce.
Well, you know what? I heard they tried to go to Cocos Island, but there was a landing fee.
Yeah, I think it was Bonnie Suba who said they're probably Chinese spies coming down here to psych out the infrastructure here.
That's what happened with Pearl Harbor.
It did, yeah. So that could very well be. The article says there have been no requests for resources routed through GHS, OCD on the matter. Well, anyhow, it's not much of a story. It's time for me to say goodbye to our president. Let's go, Brandon. We'll see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagatna, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A personhood law on hold. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A federal judge in Phoenix has blocked enforcement of a new law in Arizona that gives all legal rights to unborn children. Abortion rights providers had sued, claiming the law puts them at risk of prosecution for providing what would be otherwise legal abortions. Arizona's Attorney General Mark Brnovich says he'll appeal that order. The Biden administration has told hospitals they must provide an abortion in cases where the mother's life is threatened by a pregnancy, regardless of state law.
The White House says federal law supports the statement. The Department of Health and Human Services cites the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, passed in 1986, which essentially says doctors must assess if a woman is in labor as well as if they would be subject to an actual or potential health emergency. Many of those potential problems include issues during pregnancy or resulting from a pregnancy loss. HHS says this federal guideline supersedes state law, even in states that have banned abortions following the overturn of Roe v. Wade.
Fox's Gernal Scott. President Biden leaves this evening on another foreign diplomacy trip, this time to the Middle East, with stops in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Palestinian territory. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
This trip will reinforce a vital American role in a strategically consequential region. And also, it will reinforce that our role is different today than it was 20 years ago on the eve of the war in Iraq.
The president Monday got a preview of the first images from the deepest regions of space from the James Webb Space Telescope.
These images are going to remind the world that America can do big things. And they remind the American people, especially our children, that there's nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing beyond our capacity.
NASA will release a series of images from the telescope publicly later today. America is